Hello, my name is Donna Williams, and I was going to talk a bit about animal alters. There are people who perhaps develop new alters after early childhood, but in my case, most of mine had developed around certainly by 3 to 4 years old. There are some memories and indications they've been around since 2 to 3 years old. There certainly was a flare-up of all of the DID stuff again when the same kind of issues were all reignited in late childhood. So it was kind of like a second level of assault that reawakened the extremity of what had been happening in the earlier years. So I wasn't really aware of the animal alters, and I have 3 in my team. One's a cat, one's a rabbit, one's a bear. And I have named the cat Ning, and the rabbit is Foosh, and the bear I've called Opie. And it's not like these really came out of nowhere, because in my childhood there was, for example, a time when I was about 9 where I insisted I had to only wear a leotard to school. It was a long sleeve mauve leotard, and I believed I was a rabbit. So I was about 9, and it's probably pretty strange to have a child insisting to go to school in only a leotard, but I then desperately wanted to have a tail, and I believed that essentially I was a rabbit. And when I did overcome the insistence of just wearing the leotard, I would wear some clothes and the leotard, because then I was at least a rabbit underneath the clothing. It was very difficult to get me to wear any shoes. The shoes had to all come off. I did have some tics which involved sort of sideways hopping and some of this stuff, and but otherwise I didn't really think too much of the fact we had a rabbit. I knew when we had eating problems that if you put out lettuce and celery, the rabbit part of me would eat them, and it was a bit of a joke. Oh, you're a rabbit. And but there actually was someone in the team who identified as a rabbit, and eventually this became aware of it. So the cat has been there forever, was thought to be part of one of the others, which is Polly, and Polly is quite funny and very daggy, and likes to do things like lick the soap and do all kinds of strange, it's very surreal. So we figured that the cat was probably part of Polly, but the cat had always, it will eat things off benches directly. It will drink directly out of a bowl, drinks out the tap directly. It's a bit embarrassing to talk about animal alters. The cat had a cat language, which is talking in meow, and we had always had this. So, if the cat was upset, you would go, "Ow!" If you had the cat that was, the cat was feeling quite good. If the cat was uncertain but in a reasonable mood, meow. If the cat was a little sad and down, so these were some of the sounds we had always had. We'd always had a repertoire of cat speak, and it came from real cats, and the fact that one of our alters would stare and stare for hours on end through the cat until feeling she had become the cat, and probably somewhere in there one of us did, and that one was Ning. So when Ning's around, she doesn't speak, she goes into cat, and if she's calling, she'll call from down the stairs. So I figure that with things like being quite meaning deaf for many years and not being quite echolalic, so it probably developed that the cat made more sense than humans, and in there was also issues with selective mutism and having stammer even once we acquired functional speech. So I'm not surprised that there was at times a reasonable level of switching and reversion to the cat. We have a bear, and I think the bear came from, we did earlier, there was also, a real cat and real rabbit, which obviously were very strongly identified with, to the point that when they were gone, we had replaced them by being of the same species. The bear showed itself various times. It would fling furniture, jump on tables. It roars, so we get the stuff. So throughout childhood, we've seen the bear. In adulthood, a couple of times when people have really crossed the line, they've got the bear. And I never really thought too much of it, because when you have alters that don't converse in anything other than animal speak, you don't really have a clear idea of how they see their lives or what they think or who they like. I mean, you can get to understand it, but once the animal alters are divided from the speaking alters, it's very different worlds inside, and how you befriend them, get them to trust you as the core self, how you help them to orient to what's gone on, that in fact they're part of a DID team, that they are part of a human being, and that they have misidentified as animals for their own reasons, and that as part of now living a much safer life on a road towards greater integration, how you're going to help them to feel safe about being human and doing things in a human way. So I guess and the other thing with Opie was lots of eating bark, eating grass, eating leaves, going up trees, a lot of smelling of everything, and being diagnosed with autism. Those things, nobody really blinks. It's like, oh yeah, well, she was diagnosed as psychotic when she's 2. She was then assessed as disturbed, then she's diagnosed with language processing disorder, and then formally diagnosed as autistic. So, yeah, of course she has, gone to the toilet in her room. Of course she isn't consistently using the toilet, and sometimes she's going in the bath, and sometimes she's going in the basin. And, those things were kind of expected, almost normal in a assumed autistic reality. And that's not to say that, everything was DID and not autism, because it was DID happening to a person who had autism. Just like, diabetes can happen to a person with autism. It's a trauma state, and how the identity adapts. So, but that is sort of where we're at. And I am now at the point where the sort of speaking more human alters got settled enough that the animal ones began to feel a lot safer in presenting, and life gets very surreal when they are around a lot, and you go out and they want to roll on the grass and rub their face on objects, and do a lot of shredding of leaves, and when there's other parts that have definitely they don't want to do those things. So it's very different forces within the one person. So we also have an object alter who came about because Anne would stare and stare at a snooker ball until she felt she'd become this snooker ball. And this part we always thought was part of Anne, but turns out that it's one from Anne's kind of subsystem. So there are a series of alters within the main system, and then Anne split further into the sort of this other set of very much the very non-verbal alters. And this one, which we thought of was the snooker ball, we ended up calling Esby, as in SB. But Esby was not at all a snooker ball. She is one who was never really acknowledged as an equal human being or child, because she has a lot of movements. So this is the part that would throw itself back in the chair for hours and do a lot of humming and a lot of this stuff, and lunging and hand weaving, and a lot of the get to your room stuff. So Esby didn't develop like the others, and she identifies more with the animals, but she is just coming to terms with that she's actually a girl, and that she is kind of a feral girl, and she's quite nice, but she's just learning all kinds of things, and about human beings, and why people have friends, and struggling because her communication is not at all near where the speaking ones got to. So I sometimes have people say, are all your alters autistic? So all I can say is, if you visit donnawilliams.net and look at the extensive photos there, which go from months old into adulthood, you can make up your own mind about the team. So I hope that was interesting and useful. I guess part of integrating selves that are not as standard functioning as the others is a challenge, but you have to take time to design a life and opportunities for those parts to be able to feel safe to present and find ways to form attachments, to explore the world, to find a way to access that world, and to undo their previous constant experiences of being discarded, secondary, terrified, dehumanized, those kind of things. So, thank you.